Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Newton, and I am going to talk about one of my longest cases that I've had in my homeopathy practice, and this is Brady. Brady is now 17 years old, and he started using homeopathy when he was 3, and by the way, he happens to be my youngest son. So I'm going to talk about his case. I'll start with the symptoms. His symptoms were severe OCD, severe violent outbursts, seizure activity, eczema, asthma, ear infections, frequent bronchitis and pneumonia, severe constipation, Chiari malformation, I'll come back to that, severe impetigo, so like staph infections, frequent strep infections, which would not remit using antibiotics, midline hernias, very low immunity, anaphylaxis, anaphylactic reactions to foods, speech apraxia, a language disorder, global developmental delay, and severe autistic features actually early on. His early days, he did start in the NICU right away. When he was born, he had trouble breathing and they had to put him on oxygen for 36 hours. He had a very weak cry, hypotonia, like low muscle tone. He was a very floppy baby. His symptoms, I would say, started right from birth, but along the way I saw several periods of time where his health deteriorated even further. So with the DTaP, I noticed, he came home screaming, and I noticed he stopped babbling at that time. That was his 4-month DTaP shot. That was the only one they had that day. He had a lot of immune problems early on, bronchiolitis, needed the nebulizer early on, eczema. The PANDAS behaviors started at 9 months, actually. He had pneumonia at 3 years old. All right, so his health conditions, I think I listed all of it. Oh, he actually had a low IQ. I forgot to mention that. All right, so infections that he had along the way were Klebsiella, that was in the gut, strep pneumonia, candida, strep throat, staph infections, Proteus we found in a stool sample, ear and sinus infections, and bronchitis pneumonia. Now we started with mainstream, then we went to sort of like supplements, then we went over to homeopathy. So let's talk about what we did. Obviously we did many antibiotics and steroids. I stopped vaccinating him after 9 months, antifungals, methylation support, which he still uses to this day. So that's like methylated B vitamins. He does a sublingual. He's never done the shot because he wouldn't let me. And now we're at a point where the sublingual seems to be fine. So then we moved to homeopathic protocols. And because the mainstream stuff just wasn't working, even the supplements did help the autistic features. He was making eye contact and he was more engaged, but he still wasn't engaging with the outside world. And he still was having these severe PANDAS rages. So his first constitutional was Thuya. We started with a 30C and I noticed a very temporary calming. And by the way, his homeopath prescribed that. I wasn't practicing myself yet. I hadn't studied yet. I think that he probably wasn't on a high enough potency. So it wasn't like long lasting results. The next one we tried was Ignatia. This helped quite a bit. And then we started carcinosin right about 6 months into homeopathy. And that's what really turned around his ability to socialize with the outside world. It helped the PANS symptoms as well. The first clear we did was the strep nosode, which he really needed because he had ongoing positive throat cultures despite using antibiotics. The strep nosode helped to clear. There was no more positive throat cultures after that. And it also helped the PANDAS symptoms. Now, I don't have a complete list. He's been treated now for 14 years and I'm continuing to give him different remedies and interventions. And I don't have a complete list, but I'm going to tell you the ones that I can remember. These are the constitutional remedies that I can remember giving him, plus the nosodes and other things. Oxygenium was one remedy. And this can be indicated for a person who's born, a child who's born with trouble breathing, literally, but it also fit his OCD and mental and emotional features. Arsenicum, belladonna, stramonium, and veratrum, those 3 were used at various times for the rage. Various strep strain nosodes, a lot of them. Candida albicans nosode, Klebsiella pneumonia nosode, Clostridia difficile nosode, Proteus nosode, Staph aureus, Bartonella, Borrelia, Babesia, all, Lyme nosodes. Those came later, much later. Influenza nosode. Histaminum. This is considered a sarcode made from histamine. This is very, very key for him on an acute level. So if he gets allergy and asthma and maybe some hive flares, histaminum helps him quite a bit to this day. We cleared the DTaP that helped his asthma quite a bit. We are now clearing the hepatitis B vaccine, and that's helping his asthma as well. And an H influenza clear. What has really helped him recently a lot, actually, is removing dairy. And that took a long time for me to convince he and his dad that he needs to stop eating dairy, because he lives, he doesn't live with me half the time. The Chiari malformation. This is where the brain stem is herniated down into the spinal column, creating pressure and pain. He lost the ability to walk at one point. He lost the ability to swallow. We were weeks away from brain surgery, but luckily we did a steroid taper at the time, and then we switched over to homeopathy. And as far as I can tell, no Chiari symptoms for many years. I did notice the Chiari would flare with the PANDAS flares. So it was literal brain inflammation, like physical brain inflammation happening at that site. His IQ, as far as we can tell, is way up. We haven't had it retested. It was 93 at one point. He's now in all advanced classes on the honor roll all the time. He is very social. He has friends. He didn't make friends until about 8th grade. He's now a sophomore. We held him back 1 year, so he's turning 17. He's got a big friend group. He goes and does things with them. He has a lot of fun. He's a very happy and funny kid. He's very engaging, makes eye contact, is very bright and with it, gets everybody laughing, always smiling. We call him Mr. Sunshine. He still takes supplements for immune and methylation support, not daily because he's not always with me, but he tries to keep up with it. He does get hives when he gets sick sometimes. He does get some asthma when he gets sick. We're able to resolve most of his colds and flares and things with, not flares, but colds and maybe sinus infections or whatever with homeopathy. Sometimes a little bit of albuterol. We always keep, the emergency meds on hand as well. He had a puberty flare, which surprised me because we started it at 3 years old. PANDAS sort of became a thing of the past, and then boom, at 11 years old, right around the time it seemed like puberty was starting, he had a flare. Now, this was interesting because this sort of speaks to the fact that when a flare occurs, it's not always just an infection. Sometimes it's an infection plus a trauma that can happen together and bring on a flare. Because if there's nothing like emotional or traumatic happening in your life, you're more likely to get that infection and for your body to respond in a normal way, such as a sore throat and a fever, not a PANS flare. But he did get sick when he was 11. Remember, he's turning 17 soon. And he went on a cruise and got sick. And when he came back to me, he was a changed person. He even got a little bit violent, but since he was mature, he was able to sort of catch himself like, whoa, where did that come from? He got very OCD, very emotional all the time, very angry. Now, he also had a little bit of a trauma that week. He was coming to understand that his brother, who he was very attached to, was now very attached to his girlfriend. So his brother and his girlfriend were very attached, and Bradley was feeling kind of left out in the cold, and that was really traumatic for him. Also, he had to stop sucking his thumb that week. Yes, he was 11 years old and still sucking his thumb. That was part of just his coping mechanism. Why did I not make him stop? I don't know. I had so many other things going on. Soon I'm going to tell you about my other PANS child and my own health. I just couldn't manage it all. But the thumb, I believe now, was used as sort of one of his coping mechanisms. He would pop it in there, didn't have to think about his emotions. And when we had to make him stop because he was getting a palate expander put in that week, he pretty much had a meltdown. It was devastating for him because now the crutch was gone and he had to feel those emotions. That's what I was witnessing happening. Since that, now that exacerbation lasted about 3 months. We cleared it with homeopathy. And so the homeopathy helped right away, but it took 3 months for him to really go back to baseline, just the happy, healthy kid that he is. What else can I tell you about his case? He hasn't had a flare since then. I believe that his level of susceptibility is different. I don't believe that he's susceptible to PANDAS flares anymore. Could he have one at, say, 30 if a traumatic experience happens and an infection comes in at the same time or whatever? Yes. There's always the possibility that any of these kids could have a flare in the future. But as long as they are aware of it, they catch it early, they maintain, they work to keep their stress levels down as much as we can in the society, the chances are lower that they will ever have a flare. So would I consider Bradley cured? Sure. He doesn't seem to, he has had strep infections since then and hasn't had any PANDAS symptoms. However, I catch it early, right? I jump in there with remedies and prevent that from happening. If I didn't do that, would he have a flare? Maybe, will he have one in the future? Maybe, but he seems to me like his level of susceptibility has changed, meaning he's not susceptible to a PANDAS flare. He's more susceptible to like a fever and a sore throat, which is a normal response to an infection. So call that a cure if you want. Are we always watching out for a potential flare? Yes, we are, especially Mama Bird here. Okay, so I hope that helped someone to see sort of a long-term PANDAS case and the potential for homeopathy to unravel a very complex case. I don't even think I've told you everything. I mean, he had a hole in his heart. He had hernias. He had a hernia surgery. He had a seizure and stopped breathing. Like, he's had so much in his medical history. I would be here for an hour, but I wanted to give you the general progression of the case. This is a complex case. There are some cases that would, I don't know, maybe they would be considered cured within 6 months. I've definitely seen that with a less complex case. There's just a lot less to unravel. Maybe the brain inflammation is a little bit less at the time. Maybe there's not so much autoimmune or immune dysregulation. So a case will respond differently depending on what is happening and maybe how long the symptoms have been there and stuff like that. All right, if you have any questions, you can contact me at this website, and I look forward to hearing from you. Let me know if you have any questions below.